we'll actually start.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Thank you.
So they're coming in. And hello, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. We're just waiting for everyone to log on. Still coming in, so just a couple more seconds. All right, I think that we can get started. Let me just highlight myself. So welcome everyone. Thank you for logging on and attending this evening's program. My name is Matt Schumann. I am on the programming team here at Carey Library. Before we begin, just a few things to note. Please let me know in the chat if there are any technical issues that I can try to resolve. And if you have any questions or comments otherwise for the poets, please submit them via the Q&A button, and we will address them at the end. This program is made possible by the generous donors to the Carey Library Foundation. I'd like to now introduce Cami Thomas. She has published 2 books of poems, Cathedral of Wish and Inscriptions. Her 3rd book, Tremors, will be out in the fall of this year, and all of these were published by 4 Way Books. She lives here in Lexington, so now please welcome Cami.
Thank you very much, Matt. And really thanks to everybody for coming this evening. I'm just going to be briefly introducing each reader. Okay. Tingyu Liu was born in Huaian, China, grew up in Miami, and currently works in Boston in biotech. She's been published in The Normal School, 4-Way Review, Borderlands, Bodega, and elsewhere, as well as various scientific journals for her neuroscience research. She has degrees from Pomona College and MIT. Aside from poetry, Tanya enjoys trail running and learning Spanish. Tanya.
Thank you, Cami, for the kind introduction. And thank you, Matt, as well, at the whole Carey Library for making tonight possible. I'm really honored to be reading tonight alongside Aimee, Shauna, and Christopher. I mean, their work is truly inspiring, as you'll soon hear. So welcome, everyone. And just want to begin by saying, you know, here in Boston, it doesn't really seem like it tonight, but it is spring. And this spring, I think, resonates more than really any other one. The cliche of new beginnings and spring cleaning, you know, have a whole new significance now in this pandemic and vaccine era. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to read tonight, I decided in that light to start off with 2 very new pandemic-inspired poems. The first poem I'll be sharing with you tonight is titled Quarantine Jazz. Yes, even now there is jazz. No, not from the belly of the piano, exuberant bass strings, saxophones, deep whine, a spell weaved on stage, tuxedos and ball gown, shoes, shiny and black, fingers in flight dance and bodies in sway, bodies light and heavy with motion under a low ceiling, oval tables barely enough for 2, candlelights pulsing within embroidered glass globes, wooden chairs whose screws have long been overlooked, so they hum half a beat behind, everywhere a haze, perhaps bottled from ages past, and now misted out generously, spotlights gold, straining through everything, heady, as if you entered this world via a secret bookshelf, gripped that blue book with the 2 white border. Yes, there is jazz still. Yes, it emits from a single Bluetooth speaker and sizzles when Billy hits those high notes. Yes, it is walled within your 3rd floor studio, wrap around wooden cabinets, unmade bed. But it's jazz still, and it knows of hard times, has thrived in them. And so it leans in and gently strokes the coils of your miniature speaker, offering up a little blue book. Thank you. Someday I would love to be crammed again into a tiny, uncomfortable seat in a way too crowded venue and listen to some great live music when it's safe to do so, of course. And so in this next poem, I wrote this past winter, it was when I felt like it was particularly cold and gray and it felt so unbearable being inside. And it's times like these that family really comes through. So this poem, as you'll see, is dedicated to my mom. And it's titled, A Little Thirst. No child nor babe, no dog, not even hamster or fish, just dust kept meticulously away by shark vacuum. But pandemic has called my four walls inward, off-white press against chest and spine, squeaking along my heels. And beyond my windows, also off-white everything, slush winter, cold enough to bleach my bones. So I call my mother and, her Florida garden bountiful, she mails me 5 plant clippings, each folded carefully in tissue, bound in rubber and twine. I know no plant names, and so she pronounces them for me in Mandarin. 绿萝, 斜爪兰, foreign still, my mother tongue barely mine. But my mother smiles patient, her song words slipping through crude ears. 有岛东's rounded edges only stay pink in direct sun, but 斜爪兰 would wilt, so keep them separate, water them together. But be judicious with water. Drowning is the most common form of plant death, death by overcare. A little thirst has never killed a plant, my mother says. I house the clippings in shiny ceramic planters, perlite-enhanced soil. I watch them closely as if I could catch them in growth. Silly of me, but if I sit still long enough, I swear I see the walls lean back. Outside, the ice drips into water. Pandemic warily watches our defiance. I have so many responsibilities now, taking care of all these new plants alongside with cleaning out my shark vacuum. But yeah, the indoor greenery definitely was a lifesaver this winter, and I'm glad to be seeing it outside my window as well these days. My computer is trying to restart, which is not good. Okay, here we go. I think in terms of new beginnings, another new beginning is the political scene. And of course, there's many facets to that. And one facet is on immigration. I think the rhetoric and actions against immigrants have been quite negative, especially recently, but I think there's also reasons to be optimistic, both in the political scene and the wider community. So as a first-generation immigrant, I wrote this poem to help me process my thoughts on that, and it's titled Numerically American. 4 years after I arrived in the United States, after a plane ride so long it popped my ears so that, despairingly, I pulled hard on my pigtails and hummed "Oh MacDonald Had a Farm," the only American song I knew, too loudly, and the other passengers stared. 4 years after that, an older girl explained to me how citizenship worked, how I could only be American if I lived here longer than in any other country. I was 9, and that week I was almost popular, so I lied. Perhaps I'll always be 1 year away from being American. When living in Munich, I was often asked why American flags are everywhere, 1 on front lawns, 2 at both ends of white boats, 3 on small, wide-eyed faces at county fairs, and stretched over every article of clothing, every body's bulge and crevice. I shrug, explain how we, they, are proud, once proud, of a freedom fought and won. And ours is the best freedom. Our textbooks taught us so. These days, I'm American, I say, when I'm not in America, and the opposite when applicable. And when they squint, ask, but where are you from? I'm stubborn in my answer. Citizenship, briefly a thing of illusion, a smoke line ignorance, a placeholder for facts, a color given, a face defined, because who anyway adds up? And isn't that really what makes a country? Isn't that where the light is? This next poem is also about new beginnings in a way, and it's also newly published just a couple weeks ago. So what inspired this poem was a science article I read a couple years ago that scientists were trying to make a new element, 119. So any element after plutonium doesn't exist naturally and has to be synthesized in a lab with like huge reactors and a lot of powerful energy and large machines. And so basically you have to fire an ion beam at a really heavy element in the hopes that the nuclei will fuse together to form a newer, heavier nucleus. So I was pretty fascinated by that concept, how to make a brand new element and then slapping a name on it. So the title of this poem is called To Create Element 119. Scientists are bravely activating particle accelerators, firing ion beams into an atomic nucleus. Scientists also create babies on beds, couches, or checker blankets in the woods next to a small wicker basket of strawberries and brie. These creations will be named after grandmothers and great uncles, biblical figures, the bold protagonist from a shared favorite movie. I like to daydream I'm an obstetrician, confidently strolling into neonatal rooms to steal ID bands from wide-eyed babies. Could I delay their proclivity to play Lieberstrom at Carnegie Hall, to overeat buffalo wings during Sunday football, to create and name away all the elements? Some days, I must reassure myself that elements only make up 5% of the universe, that the rest is filled with bombastically named mysteries. Dark matter, dark energy, cover us in your vast hands. Don't let us find you. So I often get poetic inspiration from scientific articles. And this next poem derives from an article that shares some fantastic facts about the oceans. So really 100% inspired this poem, and it's titled Excavating. Not knowing, the last of the last times slipped past us like small ships. No memory of the last hand within hand, the last curving against curve, the last naming, the last receptor clasping and unclasping, the last trace of us traveling from spine to mind, axons to dendrites, a relay of loss. If we took every fish and scattered them equal distant across the waters, there'd be less than 1 minnow for every Olympic-sized swimming pool of sea. There are many ways to describe loneliness. There are not enough ways for light to travel through water. There are approximately 3 million wrecks beneath the seas. Imagine if a ship knew it'd be her last sail, how deliberately she would have gripped the salt winds, how tentative her bow, how peering within, she marveled at all that shine and shining, all that light inside of her, all those seafarers calling her name. Once we learned that humans know more about the surface of Mars than the seabed. If we were anything together, we were cosmologists. How much easier it is to look up, where space can't flood out the planets, not even the ones light years away. Once I told you that if I could be anything, I'd be diving. I'd be a trace against the seafloor, tendering. On a water theme, my last poem is also a very new poem, and it's one of the things I'm looking forward to post-pandemic. It speaks to a yearly tradition during a winter weekend that I've been honored to be a part of for the past several years, even though the tradition goes on for far longer than that. And so as I reflect upon those precious weekends, I'm often struck by our group's evolution from grad students to adulthood and the grand stability of friendship. So this is titled Winter Getaways. It is night now, sub-zero, and we are 7 with at capacity at 4. We curtail our gestures to stall the slosh and loss of our precious defiance against winter as we flow from topic to topic. The election, colonizing Mars, classic rock nostalgia, climate change and methods of electric battery disposal, high school romances and the last time you ran into them at Home Depot during Thanksgiving. Our bare arms gleam. Our fingers flick droplets into the air where some dissipate and some settle on our shoulders, slightly cooler. We clutch beer cans or plastic pull-safe wine stems, and our lungs are buoyed, bullish. We are strumming each other's words, brimming with the potency, friendship a luxury evinced by the gray combed into our temples and patches of damp beards, the sun freckles on our backs and the etchings around our eyes. For this evening, we are luxurious. No grocery lists and 30-year mortgages, the too real question of children, shoveling snow before morning commutes, grandmothers who have forgotten our names, the right knee announcing itself after every jog. Countless tiny bubbles foam and flow from one person to the next. Small stalactites form at the napes of our necks. There is no end to the motor's hum. There is no end to the sky lit by bright steam unbound. That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tanya. That was wonderful. That last poem is amazing. All right, next, Shauna Hill's poetry has appeared in San Pedro River Review and Slipstream magazine. Her poem Tide, published by the Museum of Americana, was a 2020 Best of the Net finalist. She's a member of the Poemworks Collective of Boston and is the founder of Poetica Pastor, a business which assists writers in the publication process. Shauna.
Thank you, Cami. Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be reading with this group of poets, and I wanted to thank the Library of the Carey Library of Lexington and Cami Thomas for inviting me to participate. The following poems are from my working manuscript. Poem in which I try to take care of my poem. I should, for example, sleep beside it, wake with it at 3 a.m. in a sweat. In the morning, I could change the sheets from our night of tantric sex. I could persuade my poem to go on double dates, hang out with more sophisticated poems, banter about oysters and kale. But I do worry. Do my poem and I have an intimacy problem? I secretly hate my side of the bed. I wonder if I should tell my poem this. I ask way too much of it. It has its own work to do. I insist we get organized, stop drinking on weeknights, go for a jog in the snow. But my poem has another solution: television dinner. I should soak my poem in Epsom salts, saunter it around the room, drop ecstasy with it, anything to fall back in love. Third grade girl, 1976. Mrs. Norbit yells at me for not being confident enough. But I know how to talk back. She yells so close I see her spit. Grown-ups must be right about me. I joined Girl Scouts for a day. I quit. Mom won't buy the uniform anyway. How come boys always get away with going up my skirt? I quit wearing skirts. They said they'd beat me if I told. They punched me anyway. Boys punch weak. In the fountain, I find green gum stuck in the basin. I pretend it's not there. It's probably Kenny Gilday's. At lunch, he takes out his retainer and leaves it on his tray. I see everything he chews. My only friend is an English girl. I shouldn't have mocked her for losing the American Revolution. She's dainty like a teacup. She won't break. The following poem is in the form of a pantoum. Moving to a new congregation. When I was baptized, at first, Presbyterian, the whole congregation sang. They became my godmothers and my godfathers on account of my new holy being, Presbyterian. The whole congregation sang. When Dad sang, he'd tilt his head. On account of our now holy being at Covenant, I lost those godparents. When Dad sang, he'd tilt his head. He'd stroke his beard, then stop. In Covenant, I'd lost those godparents. Praying always felt like drifting. He'd stroke his beard, then stop, mid-phrase, sort of gone like a man. Praying sometimes felt like drifting when it came to him. Mid-phrase, sort of gone like a man. He'd stop singing. The choir kept on when it came to hymns. He said sighing was a kind of praying. He'd stop singing. The choir kept on. They became my godmothers and godfathers. They said sighing was a kind of praying when I was baptized at first. My sister accused me of being in love. In a stairwell, she showed me my very own diary, where I'd written in fat letters inside a penciled heart, I love Donny Osmond. I ate her Snickers. I called her a jerk. She said sticks and stones. I aimed a shoe from the second landing onto her hand. She wailed. She never let me read her diary. Besides, I can't read script. I already knew she kissed the boy on the unicycle. My sister went on to marry her best friend Sarah at the age of 9. I was the proud flower girl. They taught me the myth of buttercups, how when yellow petals shine on your chin, it means you love butter. I was always the youngest. They served cheese doodles at their play wedding, played Here Comes the Sun. After she sewed me a corduroy hippo, blue with red lips. Don't worry, I'll play with you until I outgrow you. I kissed that hippo until his mouth fell off. Raymond Park. In the trash barrel by the baseball field, I saw it. Please don't be human parts, I begged. The femur was white, woolly, tufted, bloodied. It must be a dog, deliberately placed under paper in the rain. I walked fast away. Someone is trying to hide something and I better not tell. Hide like I hid other facts, how I knew my neighbor's dad drank Narragansett beer. He had a stack of porn in the hallway closet. I knew with that I better not tell. So I decided it wasn't bones, decided not to tell my parents, not to call the cops. The cops were always angry. Whenever I hear sirens, I think of that dog, how he was bone curdled, how he couldn't howl his suffering, being just bones. Granite State. The last time I went, I tried to find the old man of the mountain, and I found I could not because I'd be too sad to see his face gone, the chalet sold. I went once to the resort of wooden apparatus where skis crossed like slippers on a wall. Shadows of dust outlined the missing crown of antlers, hung, then stolen. That resort had nothing to do with me. But I stole a lucky skiing wallet from a boyfriend. Empty, I used it for years. Made of nylon and Velcro, the wallet was renowned on Cannon Mountain, owned by countless boys. Written in marker, someone's initials still bleeding from sweat, and they had passed it round like a girl they all claimed to date. They must have named the wallet Talisman of the Mountain. Every boy rubbing her initials between fingers, seeking power, seeking mountain tricks, whirring circles in the air. That is what the rich kids did with their luck. I never go to New Hampshire, not even for cigarettes. The following poem is a persona poem. Clamshell Mary. Blue grotto, salt divine, poised on the tarmac beneath a loggia vine, which swayed above me and a Chrysler. Then someone bought me at the estate sale, took me crosstown in the rain. I wept in the back of their pickup truck. They must have bought me as a joke. I'm no joke. I'm a mother of God. Eyes down, hands wide, now chipped plaster of Paris, fading on a garden knoll, behind a backhoe and blueprints for a future garden gentrified. Will the wind still hail me, Mary? Stuck in the Gulf of Carpentaria, Australia. It's not going well for our crew, this mapping of the world. I chart the uncharted gulf, 5 yards deep and shortening. We almost run aground. I'm forgetting how to map. We try to port, but the man at the jetty waves us away to moor at the Isle of Barigny. A tubular wave of cloud known as the morning glory is piped across the sky, a marble spanning 50 miles further than we can get. Boats of fishermen warn the sea is filled with tiger and bull shark. We aren't exactly wrecked, but retorn sails have halted us, so we plant ourselves on this island and do things. Hike what can be hiked, past bush site and a lean-to, go too close to the nest of an Arabini bird and say, smile. Find the missing plane wreck, eat tuna on soppy bread. The fishermen had buried last night's fire next to the new fire. Upon that sand is where one of our crew steps, burns his foot so badly he has to give up walking in salt water for a month. Low on food, we hunt crab. Some of us cross an estuary in the dark, sing loudly to fend off crocs, shush ouches in staccato through the thorny rocks. I stab a sea cucumber. Do invertebrates feel pain? Poor thing. She is just lying there in the current and I mistake her, cannot get the harpoon out. One might call this longing. You get off the phone with me because it's bath time. I have to imagine you naked, alone, a candle lit, your head propped against tiles, the curtain barely open. Your genitals float like a lotus on a veiled pond. You take baths unironically. How long do they last? I wish you'd invite me. Let me scrape the sunburn off your back. No, you always say, no extras today. Even the dog must stay in the other room. Why not just tell me the water's temperature, or if you listen to music? Are your eyes closed? I hope so. First marriage at 49. Why did we wait so long to bite, to open the apple of ourselves and press our star core against paper, an imprint of the idea of us, too late to be some other fruit, no pith or pit, no endocarp, no way to form a seed, no mango strands that cling to stone. Let's say we are infertile and decide to improvise, perfume our way to rot. Tide. In my gut, I am a train with gears that roar. I rush away from petty noise. I growl into night so ashen, paper floats pressing soot upon a face to tinker with a sleeper. I glide by houses too old the builders barely knew of trains, and underneath on rusty song lines crossing, singing latitude and longitude, measuring each lot in smuts or other metrics one might fathom. I know, underneath and underneath and underneath. I clutch the land that I am stitched to. The railway ties together. Trains sing to astonished dirt. We are made of metal. We conduct the crust of earth. And this is my final poem. Alsace is not far from this poem. I'm told to savor Pinot Gris, savor it cold in my mouth, twig the taste of ancestry, twig each bud of the tongue. When grapes have stopped falling, what becomes of the stranded fruit? On the vine it shrivels, on earth stomped. I have too much on my tongue. I have nothing but plans. Plans to make a teepee of jetin cigarettes. Plans to fly a buttress over the dead cat's dish. So many things need mending. So many coat pockets. So many docks to sarn, letters to invert. So much self-love based upon the opinions of others. Every one of my ancestors stored in my DNA wants to be known, wants to come out and chasten me. Shauna, what do you plan to do with this world? Thank you for listening.
Very good, very, very good. Thank you so much, Shauna. Those were great. Thanks. Just a reminder to people listening, if you do have questions for the poets, you can put them in the Q&A little area, and we will take them up at the end. Our next reader is Aimee Sands. Her second manuscript, Signatories in a Darkened Field, was a semi-finalist for the Tupelo Press 2018 Dorset Prize. Her first collection, The Green Go Turn of Telling, was published by Salmon Poetry Limited in 2012. Individual poems from these collections have appeared in Field, Missouri Review Online, Beloit Poetry Journal, Poetry Ireland, Salamander, Saranac Review, Poet Lore, Measure, and other literary journals. She's been a fellow at the MacDowell Colony and holds an MFA from the Bennington Writing Seminars. She's a co-director of the Brookline Poetry Series, a 19-year-old Boston area venue. She teaches writing at Harvard Business School and Bentley University. Previously, she was an Emmy Award-winning reporter and documentary producer for WGBH radio and television in Boston. Her website is aimeesands.com. Aimee.
Thank you, Cami. Well, it's really nice to be here. The funny thing about this reading is that we can't see you. And we can't even see each other when we're reading. So it's a little bit of an eerie experience, but I'm going to do my very best. There, now I can see my fellow readers. Tanya and Shauna, that was lovely. And Christopher, I'm really looking forward to hearing you again. So I'm going to read first 3 poems that have to do with the past year. I sort of feel like President Biden, like there's just so many things hitting us at once, except as poets. It's so hard to write about it. I guess when you become president, you can try to do something, at least he is. When you're a poet, it's hard to write about what's happening in the world sometimes, but I managed to get these 3 out. So the first one is called What Makes Me White? Under the bath water, my belly lies calm as a whale, my skin gleaming like the inside of a clamshell. I study my untanned color. I am not white like paper or clouds. I am sand white, bone white. My belly rises and rests under the quiet water. What makes me white? Is my mottled and varied skin a flag that signals which side I'm on? Which side is that? Do I wear my skin like armor or a shield? Against what? Pandemic. Vetch crept unchecked in the winterless garden, collared the base of the flowering pea just fledging its purpley bud. Ragged streamers splay like straw remnants of November and fingerless cold in the soaked March earth. Season is in the making, goldfinch grading to yellow, chickadee's limpid two-tone appeal, red-bellied woodpecker racketing into a trunk. We raise our binoculars, check phones, police roll by. Closeness is our crime. It's grave time, sap tapping time, little tune on buckets in the rain. We cannot find our distance. And the owl light dims among the fir trees. She is calling her chicks. They are lifting their faces. We have taken off our masks, hoping, near breaking, ragged as sparrows in an unsparing rain. Forecast. It's pansy weather, mastectomy cold. The goldfinch has gone yellow from their winter green. Chesty nubs poke from the ground, a black pestilence coats the plum tree. Flagging now, this shop-worn planet. Spring elbows its way in where it still can. Bright candor of fleshy tulips, topical as the news, where topsoil has washed away in the floods of Nebraska. Plants can't snub you. Dwarf iris offer their spotted throats. They have no backs to turn. Sagaponic blue and purple ermine. We have to live our lives, you say. Random cruelty racks the border. Mulch is what's needed. Crumbling decay and fat worms still at depth like fish, waiting for the surface to warm. So this next group of poems concerns my happy family life. I always like to say that all poets have happy family lives, and I'm no exception. The first poem is called Corridor. The snow made a cave. The snow made a cave, erupt, corrupt. It opened before me. I tunneled through. It closed behind me. No way out. Exit ramps died in secreting darkness. Cars sat backwards, blinking by the side of the road. I sped on, clutched inside my own raiment, little booth of temporary light, collapsed, abrupt, my eyes sore and staring. I was 63. It was December 7th. My father was 92, deprived at last of speech and fists and monster, ogre, beast, speech that garbled and stopped in my mouth like a tape stretched thin, foreign face that covered mine, and spoken, not spoken, breath, not breath, coxcomb, corkscrew, corpse, and corridor I found by touch and groped along, words in my teeth, words that spoke before I could, and speaking, gripping the steering wheel, approaching him, the he that could no longer stamp me, snow like madness, whirling up into the night, spoken, not spoken, broken, not scorn, and the corridor is one that I make now, of verbs and nouns and compound parts of speech, invented or recovered, cemented one to another for the purpose of seeing my way. I grew up in a little street in suburbs of New York. And like all children of trauma, any little gleam of kindness was so memorable. This poem is called Miss Murrah. Miss Murrah had cats and a tall crystal jar full of candy. You could sample one sweet globe at a time while sitting decorously on the edge of her grandfather chair, a cat on each arm and one atop the back. She lived across Annandale Street in a house set back, no grass, just trees. You got there down a long dirt driveway and through a hole in her basement. You didn't have to go to the front door. You just climbed the basement steps up to her kitchen, and she was always kind, though the boys sometimes crouched at that hole to smoke cigarettes. Or was that after the hole was sealed up with steel? But they could still smoke there, and we tried to ignore them since we knew they weren't supposed to be doing that. Miss Murrah had curly white hair, and there was no need to hide from her or pretend to feel safe. No one shouted. Plates were never chosen one at a time from her cupboard and smashed on the kitchen floor while my mother begged him to stop. They were her grandmother Mudgie's plates, but he would just look at her while he reached for the next plate, and we had to watch. Miss Murrah had cats and a jar full of candy you could suck on, one shiny globe at a time. You could get there by crawling through the hole in her basement and up the basement steps. You didn't have to knock, and you couldn't hear Mom's muffled voice pleading, "No, please, Jean, no, Jean, don't, Jean," from beneath the kitchen floor where she thought we couldn't hear. Miss Murrah had cats. There was that musky cat smell in the dirt outside her basement, and still when I smell it, next to a woodpile or underneath a juniper tree, I inhale deeply. So I started playing the piano when I was 7 years old, and I played until I was 17, and considered becoming, trying to go to a music school and becoming a concert pianist. But I thought I wouldn't be able to stand the hours and hours of practicing alone. So I became a poet. I still have the same problem. This is called Clef. Like me, 6:30 a.m., pegged to the piano each morning for years, dutiful movement across the keys, scales, arpeggios, grueling as capital letters, as a bee formed to fit between the lines. My mother said, "Straighten your back when you sit on the bench." My father said nothing, even as I was born into Beethoven, Bach, and Debussy, sonatas, preludes. Crone I was at 12, 10, 13, 17, crone of the grand piano crouched in the family room, my fingers crooked with cold and tying my family together, chord by clotted chord, the dissonance, harmony, march from bass to high C. Even the intricate knottings of the fugue could not tie them sound. And I, manufacturer, corpus of the round and the straight, disciple of half notes and rest signs, key signatures, clefs, crone of the butterflies who squeezed themselves free, tones that wanted only to jangle and spike, casualties of the code breakers, the pitch seekers. Now that I am 64, are they here, alive, wings closing, opening, their wild spots vivid as quarter notes running up the staff? Thank you. I can see the other panelists and they're applauding. I'll look at the chat later. I hope some people are saying something so I know you're there. I also want to say hello to some audience members I haven't seen in many years. I know Diantha Rao is out there, and friends I haven't seen in a fair number of years. Midori, hi. Forage. So I come from an upper middle class family, so we actually got to rent a house at the far end of Long Island every summer for a month. Can you imagine? It's like so beyond anything I can do now. And this was a time and a place where my mother found some happiness and some peace, and this poem is for her. Forage. Let's go pick beach plums at Napeague. My mother wrapping her head and arms in sheet shawls, setting out with a bucket like Blueberry Sow to hunt among beach scrub and bayberries for the hard fruit. These were things she did for pleasure, found only among brambles and thickets, her religion, her conical tribute, her only devotions. Let's go to Napeague and pick beach plums in a loose cowl and shielded arms, warm, round shapes that came to her hands for free, ornaments of the pagan shrubs. This was how I was instructed in the privacies, spectacle for her eyes only, the low, dry dunes that ranged inland out of sight at the bay, practical insects and tough little shrubs. She moved among them, pricking her thumbs, scratching her arms, reaching inside the gorse. She was cactus and night hare, secret forager, monastery of demonized glyphs and rusty knowledge. My mother knew in picking the sandy way in, the way out. Cami, am I okay for time?
I haven't been paying attention.
Well, I timed it. I hope it's
like
still...
you're, yeah.
Okay.
Are you done or?
No.
Oh,
I think I have two more.
Good.
Anyway, I didn't see what time it was when I started, but I timed it before I...
You should be fine.
Okay, good. This is called Loom. This is my mom at the end of her life. Loom. Jane Austen wove her letters close. The paper was so valuable, she turned it sideways, wrote across the lines she'd already strung, paragraphs a luxury replaced by dashes, even the address surrounded on all sides, boxed by long, looping handwriting, no different from her sister Cassandra's. To write at all was precious, to form symbols others could read, and so they wrote and wrote what each knew the other would want, details of dresses, visitors, illnesses, speculations on aunts and uncles, gossip confined to a page that Cassandra later excised of all offending passages with scissors. Their letters mounted now on the walls of the Pierpont Morgan Library, 34th and Madison, having been sold and sold again. There's a smell as I draw near. At first a whiff. I check myself, sniff inside my jacket, then again, it's stronger. My mother, swirled in blue, a purple sash, bobby pin to stop her hair, still thick and white, shorter than me now and stooped. Somewhere inside her clothes, the smell's begun, becoming a stink at 84. Her rage is out of range. I feel my age, she says, but I'm not ready to say goodbye. Jane Austen died at 42. I have lost such a treasure, Cassandra wrote, describing Jane's agony at the end. People died quite often then, and illnesses were common. Bathing was an event, so everyone must have smelled. My mother moves away. I cannot save her. That evening, She tries to light the oven with a flaming wooden spoon, serves us only vegetables. Ratatouille, she says, my specialty. But the smell is gone, so somehow she must have known. Paper comes in sheaves now, and pads, if the stink of the body and age can be written of, and no Cassandra will excise these lines. What is the loom on which I form these words, unfinished, swirled in blue? So in the interest of time, I am going to read just two more. This poem is for Jim Henley, my partner of almost 16 years. It's called Unmade. Sky cupped around our world, little white seam at the horizon, sun a foghorn pouring from the west. I am tapping my eggs. Do I have any more? Creatures rolling in my womb for all those years, and I never paid the slightest attention. Now you say you want to get married, a slipshod phrase, and to what end? We have not made our bed, so what is there to lie in? An acorn cup, mussel shell, the fey roots of the cypress? Congratulations, said my father automatically. One tear escaped his eye. For me, for him. I'm dying, he said. And we stood there, awkward before his shapeless mass. These are our bodies that we carry now, 1 year later, unaccompanied like prophets, private as lobsters. If we got married, could I still go home and read, you say? And I want to know the same thing. Where are we bearing to? Winter closing in and birds hop to the feeder. Today, a cardinal confronted a woodpecker, scarlet versus seersucker, and we have advanced from that pecking at least. Canine in our wanderings, gruff and suspicious. Well, this is the bed we've made then, full of sticks, pebbles, nubby and unaccounted for, guardians each of our secret stash. And finally, the migratory birds are literally on their way here as we speak. I just looked at the birdcast on the Cornell Ornithology website, and there's a vast swarm of birds heading to Massachusetts. So go out early tomorrow morning and see what you hear and see if you can see them. Warblers in season. Today they've arrived and driven out morning before morning could take me. Carnival capers in the long early light, corkscrewing through treetops, swooping and gabbling in 13 dialects, preachy, insatiable, shining like sparklers, black-throated blue and common yellow throat. Inchworm by inchworm, they had their fill and know their way. When the moon shines half in the first clear sky, they're gone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aimee. That was gorgeous.
Thank you.
We come now to our final reader of this evening, Christopher Jane Corkery. Her first book, Blessing, was published by Princeton University Press in the Princeton series of contemporary poets in 1985. She published widely in journals in the 1990s and 2000s while raising a family with her husband in Concord, Massachusetts. Her new book, Love Took the Words, was published by Slant Books in 2020. Winner of a Pushcart Prize and of fellowships from the Ingram Merrill Foundation and the St. Botolph Club Foundation, she is also a grateful fellow of Yaddo and the MacDowell Colony. In addition to being a poet and love-struck grandparent, Corkery is a devoted sculler and has competed in the Head of the Charles numerous times. She lives in Cambridge. Christopher.
Thank you, Tammy. Cami, I called you Tammy again. Okay, can you hear me? Am I on? This is
Good.
my recent book, Love Took the Words. And it is from Slant Books, and they made a beautiful book, and I'm grateful to them and to the editor, Greg Wolf. I want you to see behind me is the painting that's on the cover. It's a painting of Piazza Santo Spirito in Florence on the far side of the Arno, and it's done by the painter John Lockwood. He did it many years ago when he was an art student in Florence. And I'm especially pleased that it's on my book because he is the son of Margot Lockwood, a very well-known Boston and Brookline poet who died in January, who was a dear friend. And it's just good to have her in this book. I'll read the first poem in the book. It's called As in the Days of the Prophets, but it's the poem that gives the title to the book. It has that title about prophets because some prophets, there's a formulation in the Old Testament, and I'm not a scholar of that. And I read it either in Ezra or Jeremiah, where they say, God took the words right out of my mouth. God made me say it. God did all this. So, as in the days of the prophets. Love took the words right out of my mouth, not the making of love, the clinging and plunge, the tongue's deep spiral, but the acts of days, the sun up and down, the dish and the pot, the light on the head of first one, then another, the stairs unswept, the bed made, the light out, the papers brought in, the bed cold, the money paid out, the bulbs dug, the children reverent at what came next, the rise and the fall of coral and ochre, the folding and sorting, the endless numbering of things, the walking with babies in slings, in backpacks, in strollers, then hand in hand, then the hand dropped. And one of them next to my shoulder eyeing before I do the hawk or the waxwing, the junco, the hermit thrush in the depths of our gunshot city, and just to the south, the great hill we climb, by season, together, alone, in pairs, in trios, the slapping of mud from our shoes on the back steps again. The chastening memory of the otter plunging in the icy water of his adequate tank. At the base of that hill, and love made the otter, love made the mud, the ice-slicked bark, the meals, the shining heads and the sleep, the risings, the children, the hawk spiral. Love took the words right out of my mouth. By the way, I didn't even say good evening to everybody. We have a lot of listeners here and it's wonderful. And I'm gobsmacked by the poems I've heard read tonight and so intrigued and happy to be in this company. I will read a poem called The Chosen. So a lot of the poems in this book are about family life. Then they're about loss and grief. And then it gets a little better at the end. It does follow the arc of my life, but not completely. This poem, several people have asked me about it. Assuming it was my personal experience, it is not, but I have known people with this experience, and it's something we all can feel whether we had the experience or not. So it's called The Chosen. Child whose mother gives you up now into another's arms, you will find your second home stunning in its swath of love. But who was it, you'll come to ask, who carried me on shining water? What dark muscle was the wall between myself and earth's pain? Mother, father, love me dearly. On this dark path, they are my guides. But who was that who first was world? Who fed me yellow drops of light? Life's wild country is more seen each day by me, omnivore. Barranca, prairie, bricked up alley. Which was the landscape that she wore? Memory, they say, cannot reach where mine has always gone. Fingers stroke my brow and lips. First light is equal to the song sung to me when I emerged. First a shudder, then that breath. I walk in company all life long with her whose loss was my first death. And this is a poem about a 2-year-old, familiar to my family, and I think my kids are all here, and I'm deeply grateful, and I love you madly. This is called Happiness. And a 2-year-old, the man he becomes, they are in this poem. The 2-year-old holds a broom as if a guitar. He is not far from a place in the stars where music is air, food, and water. The 2-year-old plays his guitar and feels the broom straws brush his fingers. One day he'll feel the curl and bristle of his girlfriend's hair. They'll sit entwined by a river and watch there on the water swans twirl. It's only May, and the dark asters that will command his grief in later years are only buds. He'll think he is a swan upon the water, for they are young. And she too, a swan, but something more. Then that thing's gone, an air played somewhere under stars. Yet where? For stars are everywhere, and to some they always speak. And the man always will think, whenever he holds his guitar thus between chest and arm, of his first happiness, of the girl, of his sure baby grip and the flick of his fingers. It was happiness, next to a window he could not yet see out of, but which his mother had polished and left full of stars. And to go on with the swans and water images, I went to graduate school in Ireland, and the reason I did that was because of Yeats, and he's one of the most significant poets, and I guess I would say people in my life. So I wish I had better glasses. Here we go. This is called It Was Yeats Who Took Me. And for all the poets here, it's a villanelle, of course. Not that he wrote that many, he did wrote a few. It was Yeats who took me. I was 17, in love with watery consonants, with boys, but Yeats would show me what my life could mean. Afraid of men, yet drawn, a sucker for looks, I studied his dark forelock, his sweet mouth. It was Yeats who took me. I was 17. My best friend's boy, another bow-lipped wonder, took me for screaming rides on his Norton 850, but Yeats would show me what my life would mean. I talked the boyfriend silly, held off advances until the time I couldn't. And yet, it was Yeats who took me. I was 17 and ready to believe words spoken to shells, because he was so lonely, like me, so weird. Yeats would show me what my life could mean. I clung to that great body, his delight in love and loss and water and swans was mine. It was Yeats who took me. I was 17 and showed me word by word what life could mean. And I still love him. Frozen Happiness. This is a poem inspired by something my mother said. She would give me suggestions about what I could write about, and she was not wrong. But a line in here and the title comes from her, and this is another villanelle, so one right after the other. It's called By Ourselves. And actually Lloyd Schwartz published this. Thank you, Lloyd. I have no idea if you're out there, but a long time ago in the Phoenix, I think. Write a poem about a playground, my mother said. An empty playground where the swings are swinging by themselves. That's one I've never read. My own son flew by himself, heels overhead. He sang a song called How Can I Keep From Singing? Write a poem about a playground, my mother said. Some stories are the tunes by which we're led, as if by a shining moon or orioles singing to ourselves. But there's one I've never read. It tells of a girl who's strong and feels no dread of her soul's high flight or of death stinging. Write a poem about a playground, my mother said. Look at a schoolyard one July, she said, where chipped green swings that live to fly are struggling by themselves. That's one I've never read. She missed her babies. She felt a quickened dread. She called to them, but they were grown, not listening. Write a poem about a playground, my mother said. Call it By Ourselves. That's one I've never read. There are various poems in here of grief. I am not going to read many of them. I am going to read one, a short poem that various people said they wanted me to read, and I shall. It's called, actually, let me preface that. I'm going to read a poem nobody asked me to read, which is important to me. It's called The Siren, and it's a sonnet, and it concerns my husband's last trip to the hospital. And it's dedicated to a poet, and I won't go into who it is because he's a terrific poet, but it's not a close friend or anything. But his poems are described here, or what they contain for me. And this second word is in quotes. The thingness of your poems impressed me. By that I mean that many were the nouns, and that among them it seemed most were concrete, unlike the previous line, and colorful or colored, the Lenten rose, the rotting meat, the lake, your lover's back, your father sleeping old and by inference gray in the adjacent room. You, though, seemed to be on hold, different from me, holding back perhaps the thing that would crack you in two, the too hard thing. And here we move to me. My husband's right-hand fingers scrabbling at his left where his wedding ring should be, and I assuring him I had it. That siren wailed for me. Sorry, I'm looking at my list. Okay, and then this poem is called By the Ocean. Written in grief, but sometime after the crisis, by the ocean. My head is storms at morning with all the things I've read. And then at night, my head is still, and you are still dead. My hip bone holds the weight of your forearm in sleep, but waking, I am alone, slight, jetsam from the deep. Yours a simple name, a lure for me into the net of safety, danger, love, sex, and I do not know you yet. Was I the pearl or you? Were you or I the shell? No answer, no answer, no answer, but the near buoy's bell. I have learned, as most every being in the world does, that one can continue having conversations with one's beloved dead for many years. It goeth on. I'm going to read a little poem with birds in it. It's called Worlds. It came out in like 2 issues ago of Aimee. So that was pleasing. And this describes a bird feeder, classic kind with a pole and a box at the top and a dowel that goes across, and the little birdies come and sit. And according to the weight of the bird, you have to fix the dowel so that they don't shut the door on themselves when they're trying to get seed. The bird feeder pictured here has no dowel. It is dowel-less. And they are downy woodpeckers. Two just-fledged downy woodpeckers, having found they can perch on the protruding ends of the feeder's dowel-less dowel holder, are repeatedly happy. They move from these to my porch rail and back. My naturalist friend says I cannot say that, happy, but I do. And the tiny bellies of these new to the world seem to want to be stroked by me. But no, worlds apart we remain. I wishing I spoke their speech or could pass, as one just has, a seed to the beak of another. And I will read two more. One is called Il Cavallino, Little Horse. And that is the name of a, unfortunately, now dried up stream behind the house of friends of my husband and I in Tuscany. Now you're thinking I'm going to describe a great villa. This is a very old house that has been refurbished just to be usable and is stunning. But it was the farmer's house long, long ago. Behind the house, it's on a great hill, is a path. And at the bottom of that path used to be a spring. And the people around there called it Il Cavallino, Little Horse. I've spent a lot of time in Italy, thanks to these friends. I don't know if either of them are on tonight, but you know who you are. And let's see, the town mentioned, it's a tiny town, tinier than you can imagine. A village, a hamlet, is called Doccia. There are some Italian words, but they will become self-explained. Il Cavallino, Little Horse. How dangerous can it be to sit on a terrace, high on a hill near Doccia, which is silent as ever? Sorry, I'm going to start again. Water. Il Cavallino. How dangerous can it be to sit on a terrace high on a hill near Doccia, which is silent as ever, minding one's business, which is not much, and thinking about the garden even higher above the old house. How full it was of rucola, how later the Parmesan, thinly shaved over the top of the greens and redolent, would be finished by only drops squeezed from a quarter lemon by your husband's hand. That hand was brown and long-fingered, graceful, and the wrist as well. Oh, how these memories feed us and starve us at the same time. No danger, though, in remembering, surely no danger. The now dry spring that was called Il Cavallino, at the bottom of a gully reached by our friend's dark path. I got water from it, squatting by an old man who said, "Prendi, bevi," offering me one of his bottles. He was old as any of the guardians of the sacred, yet unlike many of those, he was kind. Or perhaps he was like all of them in this, face to face, offering, demanding, saying, "Drink, take and drink, do it now." And I will read one more poem. There's actually a pair of poems, and you don't need both of them. I'll read the first. It's called A Light. And the light involved is shining a flashlight or something on an old slide when you don't have a slide player, as it were, to really see it. I shone a light behind the slide, transparency, to see each other young again, perhaps, or harder, to see us as we were, or as we thought we were. Do you see, my darling? I wanted to see our darling days, days before dark unfurled, Days of staring down 2 flights into the tiny square, the garden, at the furious Mr. Murphy and his potatoes. He could not have been so irascible. He gave us some square feet to work, about the size of a slide or of a memory penned. Gave us those, and you so happy at your first and almost only garden of red tomatoes, green basil, and blissful scent. It was a square, a brief catching, yet perfect grasp of happiness. In that slide, we both wear green, and though it was fall, we grinned as if it were spring, and we, permanently awake to the next thing. Thank you all very much. Thank you. I see my friends. Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
That was
Thanks,
wonderful.
Cami.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Christopher. That was absolutely beautiful. I just wanted to say, I know Matt is going to do the last phase here, but I wanted to just take a moment to thank the library very much for providing
Yes.
our space. Thanks to Matt Schumann and Christine Muir for helping us put this all together, for organizing it. And I wanted to ask Matt if he could save the chat for us so that we could send it to you guys, so you could, in case you don't have a chance to look at all of it. Also, Christopher, I don't know if you realize you can actually see who's here, not their faces, but their names. So if you click on participants and then look under participants and click on attendees, then the list of attendees will come up. Excuse me, everybody, for this tech moment, but I think it would be nice for you to be able to see who's here, and that's how you can do it.
Thank you.
So I'm going to now just again say thank you to everyone. The reading was delectable. And to turn this back over to Matt, we may have a question or two, and he will take that part of it. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, there was one question that came in so far, and I think it's just directed to everybody. So how was it for you to write in the pandemic?
Anybody can take it.
I'll take it. I couldn't write. That's how it was.
I would say I could write, but most of what I wrote that directly concerned the horror of the pandemic, which we're still in, by the way, I couldn't deal with as something I might want to form and publish, actually. So
yeah.
We'll see what happens later, but I couldn't do it.
I forced myself to write by taking two workshops that required kind of daily or weekly writing exercises. So that was, I think without that, I probably wouldn't have been able to write much at all, if anything.
Yeah, for me, I think that it wasn't really that different, but I write with other people, so it was done on Zoom, but it didn't really change that much for me. But I didn't really write about the pandemic, even though I was thinking about it.
Yeah, me too.
And then another question that came in is there an average length of time you spend on writing a poem?
Years. Depends on how many years. Not for me. There's no average. There's no average.
What are your short and long, sort of?
Well, you know that poem about the downy woodpeckers? I wrote that pretty quickly because they were right in front of me. I mean, it took me a while to realize why I was so in love with them and why they made me so sad at the same time. But that was it happened. Yeah. And certainly I will say, if it's a formal poem, I mean, there are two poems I think there are two sestinas in the book, which, as we know, are long poems. And I spend, that could take a year. I'll just keep going back to it and see what it's doing. Anyone else? Aimee?
I kind of try to keep quiet about my writing process because I'm afraid it'll go away.
Good.
Yeah, I would say there is no average. Sometimes things come out pretty formed, and other times things take years and never get to the point where you want it at. But even the best, even the most fully formed poems, I feel like you can always go back to it and find that there's little things you want to tweak here and there. So the process is never ending in practice, I guess, for me.
Same for me. I think it 8 years, sometimes much faster than I think it would, but years usually, and then I'm always tweaking.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was one more that I'm not sure if it's applicable to everybody, but please explain how you write with other people. This person thought that it was always a solitary exercise.
Shauna?
Okay, all right. So I do write with other people. I do a lot of I'm in a free write group, and I've been doing it for years. And usually when I workshop, we have free write, and it's very generative, and people inspire each other, I think, in the process of writing together. And the process is varied, but sometimes we just pick a phrase and we work off of that phrase, but there's no reason one has to. But that's the biggest problem I have with doing that, is reading my own handwriting. But just the process of actually writing gets things going for me, and it does end up being solitary eventually.
Well, and it's that you're all sitting together, or even if you're on Zoom, it's not that you're actually co-writing a poem. You're each writing your own poem, but you're sitting together, right?
That's right. And you're reading back often. And that reading back process can inspire other things. I think when you continue to free write, you'll hear echoes of what other people wrote. So it becomes sort of inspirational, mutually inspirational.
You know, I will just, going back to, I workshop with the same group of poets all the time too, every few weeks or once a month. And so there it is partly a group process, but we bring something to it and work on it.
Well, if there are, there's another question. Do you find the world of online writing and publishing and Zoom overwhelming?
Well, I haven't really dealt with online publishing and writing, but I find Zoom, I get really bad Zoom fatigue. And I feel like a lot of time on the computer in general is really bad for me, and creatively terrible. So it just, you know, I can only access certain, you know, parts of myself when I'm online. So I generally, if I've been online for any length of time, the first thing I do afterwards is just go outside, try to reconnect. So.
I mean, I agree. I agree in that if you have a week where you've done a lot of Zooms for whatever reason, personal, organizing some group you're in, you know, and they do mount up and there is a fatigue. I have been to various readings via Zoom, and it's interesting. Some of them have been delightful, not just the reading, but actually seeing all the people and seeing the comments, and others just, you know, for whatever reason, because I didn't relate that much to the work or the poets, I find wearing. But I love the ones that kind of work. They're fun sometimes. This is strange though, just because we don't see all of you, but now I'm having fun seeing the comments and the people's names. And
it's kind of a mix for me. It's as a sort of moderator, whatever person, that I really miss the room. I really miss the room. It just changes everything. On the other hand, it's miraculous that we can do this. It's so lucky. So I feel it's exhausting, but it's also amazing. So I feel a sense of two-ness about the whole thing. I'm pleased about the idea that people could have come to listen to you folks from anywhere. They could be here from anywhere. And so a lot of times the numbers of people participating have really gone up in these things. On the other hand, where is the room? I miss the room.
yeah.
Did have 90 people tonight. It was quite a turnout.
Yay, us.
Amazing. 90.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you to all the poets. The recording of this will be on the Cary Library YouTube page in the next coming days, and we will send out a recap email with a link to that, as well as links to the provided poets websites. And again, you can purchase books through Porter Square Books. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cami, for putting this together.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful night.
Thank you.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful hearing you all. And thanks everybody for coming.